July 1st, 2021. The commissioners who are present this evening are at City Hall. We have staff from City Attorney and Clerk's offices, as well as City Planning Department. If you're joining us via Zoom this evening, we can see that you are here. You may observe the meeting. However, your ability to be seen on screen and talk will be muted. During the public testimony portion of the meeting, you will be unmuted and then be able to comment. Please note that we cannot take any questions until the public testimony portion. If you have a process question during the meeting, please email cityclerk@meridiancity.org and they will reply as quickly as possible. If you simply want to watch the meeting, we encourage you to watch the streaming on the city's YouTube channel. You can access it at meridiancity.org/live. And with that, let's begin with roll call.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner Grove,
Here.
Commissioner Lorcher,
Here.
Commissioner Casanelli,
Here.
Commissioner McCarville.
Here.
Absent are Commissioners Wheeler, Seal, and Yearsley.
Thank you. So at this time, first item on the agenda is the adoption of the agenda. There are no changes, so could I get a motion to adopt the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adopt the agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is the consent agenda. And we have 3 items on the consent agenda this evening. We have approval of minutes for the June 17th, 2021 planning and zoning meeting. And findings of fact and conclusions of law for H 2021-0030 Popeyes drive-through and H 2021-0033 Top Golf. Could I get a motion to accept the consent agenda as presented?
So moved. Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. At this time, I'd like to briefly explain the public hearing process. We will open each item individually and begin with the staff report. The staff will report their findings on how the item adheres to our comprehensive plan and unified development code. After staff has made their presentation, the applicant will come forward to present their case and respond to staff comments. They will have 15 minutes to do so. After the applicant has finished, we will open the floor to public testimony. Each person will be called on only once during public testimony. The clerk will call the names individually of those who have signed up on our website in advance to testify. You will then be unmuted. Please state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes to address the commission. If you have previously sent pictures or a presentation for the meeting, it will be displayed on the screen and our clerk will run the presentation. If you have established that, let's see, let's go on from there. After all of those who have signed up in advance have spoken, we will invite any others to who may wish to testify. If you wish to speak on a topic, you may press raise hand button on the Zoom app. Or if you are only listening on a phone, please press *9 and wait for your name to be called. If you are listening on multiple devices, a computer and a phone, for example, please be sure to mute those extra devices so we don't experience feedback and we can hear you clearly. When you're finished, if the commission does not have any questions for you, you will be muted and no longer have the ability to speak. Please remember, we will not call on you a second time. After all testimony has been heard, the applicant will be given another 10 minutes to come back and respond. When the applicant has finished responding to questions and concerns, we will close the public hearing and the commissioners will have the opportunity to discuss and hopefully be able to make a final decision or recommendation to the city council as needed. So at this time, we will open the public hearing for item H 2021-0039 Orchard Park Pad C drive-through. And we will begin with the staff report and just wanted to make note for the record that Commissioner Yearsley is present.
Sorry for being late.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the commission, good evening. Just trying to get this all set up so I can present this to you. As noted, the first project before you tonight is for a conditional use permit. The site consists of 1.47 acres of land, currently zoned CC and located at about a quarter mile east of Linder Road along Chinden Boulevard. It is Lot 8, Block 1 in the Linder Village subdivision, which is now being promoted as Orchard Park. To the north is Chinden Boulevard, and to the east, south, and west are CC zoning with planned and I guess existing commercial development. History on the site is, like I noted, Linder Village subdivision, which originally was annexation, comp plan map amendment, preliminary plat, and variance for various reasons. Final plat has been approved and signed, and the plat has now been recorded. Recently went through an MDA to update the overall concept plan, but has generally little to do with this application. Comprehensive plan designation on this property is mixed use community. This property, as well as the entire area, should be taken into account. And staff finds that the proposed use, as well as the existing and proposed and planned uses in the area, meet the comprehensive plan. The proposed CUP before you tonight is for a dual drive-through serving a multi-tenant building that is proposed as approximately 5,600 square feet. The subject drive-throughs are within 300 feet of 2 existing or approved drive-throughs, one to the west and one to the east. The building to the east has received administrative level approvals and is a nearly identical building as the one before you tonight. The submitted site plan shows a rectangular building with both the northern and southernmost tenants as those utilizing a drive-through. The site plan shows 36 new parking spaces for this site. The shared parking area between the 2 multi-tenant buildings will be at least 74 parking spaces. Code would require 44 between the 2. The site plan, these drive aisles connect to the east-west drive aisle closest to Chinden Boulevard and is the closest the entrance to the drive-throughs. So this drive aisle here, and you have the north-south drive aisles that connect to it, which is the entrance to the drive-through. Because the drive-throughs serve 2 separate tenants, the traffic patterns for each cross over one another midway through the site along the west side of the building. The applicant provided a circulation plan, which is the one on the left, which shows the intended traffic pattern. Staff agrees with this, but has recommended some minor revisions and that the applicant has agreed to. Submitted plan shows that tenant A, which is the north tenant, is utilizing the yellow path, which includes the southern drive-through at the north end of the building, noted here. Once a customer orders along the north side of the building, they continue to the west side and pick up their order. They then stop at the determined drive-through crossing and go from being the inside lane to the outside lane to exit the drive-through at the south end of the site. So again, order approximately here, pick up here, stop, cross over, and then exit. After the crossing point, the yellow lane, the outside lane at that point, becomes the escape lane, which is required for the length of the drive-through lanes. Tenant B, which is the southern tenant, utilizes the blue path according to the submitted site plan and essentially follows the opposite path of tenant A. For tenant B, the entrance along the north side of the building is the stacking lane and order position. Once customers for this tenant order and then stack at the determined crossing point, they would cross from the outside to the inside to pick up their order. So again, just want to make this very clear. Enter here, order approximately here, as noted on the one on the right. Stop again here, cross over to the inside to pick up for this tenant, and then exit. After pickup, customers would continue south to turn east around the south side of the building and exit the drive-through. The proposed drive-through design is obviously uncommon and complex with the added crossing point. Staff finds that with adequate signage and striping, the proposed drive-through can work. Therefore, staff is recommending not only striping on the pavement, but also signage at the entrances and along throughout the drive-through lanes to ensure customers know which business they are in line for and how to navigate the crossing. Drive-through establishments must also adhere to specific use standards. Staff has analyzed these submitted plans for compliance and finds the proposed site plan to comply with these standards. Based on the exhibit provided by the applicant, the 2 ordering locations appear to be approximately 65 feet into the drive-through lanes, which is this exhibit here. This should allow for 3 to 4 car stacking prior to getting to the menu boards. Staff does not foresee the proposed businesses requiring extended stacking lanes like that of a Dutch Bros or a standalone coffee shop. However, staff does recommend moving the menu boards further into the drive-through to help alleviate the potential of this conflict. Other than these specific use standards, all landscaping, dimensional standards, et cetera, will be further analyzed with the CCC and design review applications. However, initial reviews of all of these requirements have been analyzed and staff has sees that they have complied with all of those. Staff does recommend approval of the subject CUP application. And after that, I will stand for any questions you may have.
Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening. My name is Mandy Brozo, 200 Broad Street, CSHQA. Madam Chairman, members of the commission, tonight I'm here to present the CUP, Pad C CUP for
You pull that microphone real close to you.
that better.
Dean, is that okay? Okay.
I do have a presentation read for you guys, and so, okay, perfect. So if you want to go to the next slide, kind of reiterating what Joe has already explained as far as the conditional use permit for a dual drive-through at Pad C, Orchard Park, Linder Village subdivision. You can see Pad B to the west has already been approved through design review CCC. Building 3 to the east has also been approved. Pad B sits right in the middle of the two of them. And this hopefully helps clarify some of those traffic patterns that we were talking about, as far as if you look at the Pad B sites coming in and going through, the pink line actually shows that it is a valet parking pickup for that tenant. That's a Tide Cleaners. So we're intending people to drive through the valet, pick up their laundry, and then actually exit through the far east exit lane, which would also be kind of the escape lane for the drive-through. The orange indicates the northern tenant's drive-through. It's not a typical drive-through. It does not have an order board. It does not have a speaker or menu. It's specifically for that tenant's to-go orders. People have called ahead. They're just going to drive through, pick it up, and go. That tenant is actually a Chipotle. And based on current health pandemic response, this is actually something that these tenants are pushing for, as they have their standard sit down, eat restaurant, then also allow them to do continual drive-through pickup kind of ordering as well for those who don't want to sit in the restaurant. You can see from the exhibit for Pad C, the intention for the entering to the site, process through the drive-through. Joseph explained kind of how we intend them to order, maneuver their way through, and exit. Building 3 is the exact same thing, except mirrored on the opposite side of the site. And in response to comments from the staff reports, we have added additional explanations for signage. When you enter in for tenant A, you're going to get to your speaker board first, order, and then turn the corner. And then you're going to stop. After you get your food, the intention is you stop. You look for the oncoming traffic. They're going to stop too, hopefully, and then continue on so you don't have that collision. It's going to be very visible to everybody with stop signs, and we're intending everyone to just come to a complete stop before they continue on and cross over. And then as you exit along the south of the building to the east, it should be just an exit lane for them. And then tenant C crosses over, picks up, and then goes. I do want to make a note that on this plan, we have been talking to the tenants, and we are thinking about moving some of these drive-through windows actually further south along for tenant A to allow for some additional stacking. And then also moving tenant C's drive-through to the south of the building to allow for some additional stacking as well. It was a concern as far as just making sure that we had that addressed. 65 feet at the beginning, I think, would be adequate. However, if it's not, we want to make sure that we provide enough beyond the menu board so that we're not going to inhibit any kind of traffic in the drive aisles. You can see here, we intend on a tenant C drive-through enter sign, a tenant A drive-through enter sign for identifying which lane they're supposed to be into as they enter into the drive-throughs. It might take some people a little bit of time to get used to that, but there is adequate sight for them to circle back around if they need to, or just stop and look at the signage and hopefully see where they need to go. We'll do some additional exit signs that are vertical in addition to any painted striping signage. That way everyone sees it vertically and on the ground. Make sure that that's something that is duplicated for everyone to see clearly. And then obviously the do not enter signs, because now you have the potential of 2 cars coming at you instead of just the one. So we're going to have the painted sign and then the do not enter sign as you exit the site. And then the rest of the pictures are just kind of pretty pictures of the building and what we're looking at. But I will stand for any questions.
I do have a question. Where else have you used this successfully?
Building 3.
Is it up and running well now, or? Yeah,
We just kind of thought that this would work, trying to get the density of 2 retail tenants in one building, especially for the Orchard Park. These are large 5,000 square feet buildings, so a single tenant for just one drive-through use isn't necessarily in our prototype. So we tried to make sure that we could get some density while making it safe and really helping that Chinden Boulevard kind of look exciting and lively.
you don't know of anywhere else you've had this. Will be the first, okay?
Yes.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Casanelli.
what about deliveries? Especially for, obviously, it doesn't seem like they'll be able to get deliveries in the rear of any of these, especially tenant B in the middle.
Yep. So tenant B actually has the fire riser and then a little bit of the utility, and those are the small, that specific one is small enough that we're encouraging just the front load deliveries. Working out with the early in the mornings, and try to not affect the business.
Basically, none of these tenants would have rear deliveries available to them.
They have rear doors, if they can work it out to get it delivered after or before hours, but it would be a matter of closing down all the drive-throughs to get deliveries into the back door.
Madam Chair, I have another question if I might.
Yeah.
Did you look at any other patterns, any other traffic flows in the design?
We did. This is it's a unique drive-through with the dual drive-through. We just feel that this would be a great opportunity to try something like this, to see if it works. The whole concept is very unique, and it took me a while to make sure that I understood what was going on so I could present it to you guys tonight. I think that with the types of businesses, the hours of operation, you're going to do a lot more for the tenant A, more of the breakfast, lunch, maybe dinner. Tenant C would be more of just a, throughout the day kind of a thing where you wouldn't really have a huge rush at both of them at the same time. But with the response of trying to add for additional stacking and things like that, that's why we're trying to move the boards around and drive-throughs around, just to make sure that we have that without impeding the actual vehicular circulation of the site. Because there's going to be people who just want to go in and sit down, and we're just trying to make sure that drive-throughs don't block that by any means.
Are there already tenants scheduled for these spaces? There are.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair, I don't
Sure.
know if this is for the applicant or not. When a tenant goes in and you're kind of designing the space for them, there's no really guarantee that they're going to stay there forever. So it could be that you're suggesting that one of them may be a dry cleaner and one would be a restaurant with a drive-through, but then down the, 2 or 3 years from now, it could be something different. Would the city require them to reapply for any, if a new tenant goes in for a drive-through?
No.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, that is, unless it's a complete change of use, then no, we would not require anything. There would be,
Change.
correct, yeah, the drive-through portion would not be reevaluated later.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff or the applicant?
Madam Chair, I do have, as long as we've gotten both and we're open here. Joe, I think you mentioned escape lanes, but On the one diagram you put up, I didn't see where that's possible until you get at least past the window for tenant A. Can you talk to that a little bit more?
Absolutely. I guess I could just leave that one up. Madam Chair, members of the commission, Commissioner Casanelli, one of my recommendations was to remove the curbing here, basically from here down, so that if somebody gets in this lane, they can use this outer lane as an escape lane. But once you get past this crossing point, this is the escape lane. There's no reason to use it unless you're leaving. You're not going to be picking up any food from the outside. So it essentially is functioning as both an exit and an escape lane, which we see a lot with any of the dual drive-throughs. I'm just glad it's not also a drive aisle.
But before, theoretically, there's no escape lane unless that curb is removed there and they can jump over to from the blue to the green.
That is
Is that
correct.
correct?
Yeah, and that's typical. We wouldn't have if the building stopped right there, they wouldn't be required to have an escape lane because the distances for the stacking are not at the mark. So
Okay.
because the overall length is long enough that they need this exit lane and escape lane.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to testify on this application?
Madam Chair, we do not.
That being said, is there anyone in the room who wishes to, or on Zoom who wishes to testify on this application? Okay. That being said, I'm assuming the applicant has no other comments. Okay, great. With that, could I get motion to close the public hearing for H-2021-0039?
Motion.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on H-2021-0039. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Yearsley.
I like it. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
You know, it'll take some time for people to get used to it, but I think you give them a month and they'll know exactly what to do. I understand the need for most restaurants anymore wanting a drive-through, and I think you're going to end up with something very similar to this in a lot of areas because most restaurants want drive-throughs anymore just because of what happened with COVID. So I think it's unique. I think it's cool. I think it'll work. I think it's good. I like it.
Yeah, I think it can too. I mean, it will take some getting used to, but I think people who tend to frequent drive-throughs are usually mostly the same people over and over. And I think as long as that striping is on there, it should be, it's just like a roundabout. Once you get through it once, you get it figured out.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher.
I think it would work as long as both weren't food purveyors. So it was alluded that one may be a dry cleaner and then the other would be, food. And since their business hours would be, even though they would cross over for timing, the needs of the drive-through would be different. If both of them were food and everybody was stacking up at the same time, I think you'll probably find some long lines and then you wouldn't have the ability for the escape lane. But if they're two unique businesses that really complement each other but don't contradict each other, it could work.
I think the tenants will figure that out. Any more comments or motions?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Yearsley.
After considering all staff, applicant and public testimony, I move to approve file number H 2021-0039 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 1st to 2021 with no modifications. Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve H-2021-0039. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Congratulations. At this time, we'll open public hearing for H-2021-0037 Da Vinci Park drive-through. And we'll begin with the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. The next application before you is a request for a conditional use permit. This site consists of 1.19 acres of land. It's zoned CN and is located at 4744 North Park Crossing Avenue at the southwest corner of North Locust Grove Road and East McMillan Road. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation for this property is mixed use neighborhood. A conditional use permit is requested for a drive-through establishment for a 620 square foot coffee kiosk within 300 feet of an existing residence and residential district on 1.19 acres of land in the CN zoning district. The proposed development plan is in substantial compliance with the provisions in the existing development agreement. A full access driveway exists to this site from the west via North Park Crossing Lane, and a right out only driveway exists to North Locust Grove Road on the east side of the lot. Direct access via East McMillan Road is prohibited. Because the width of the area proposed for the one-way drive aisle for access to the northern row of parking and stacking lane for the drive-through is too narrow to accommodate both travel lanes, vehicles in the stacking lane will encroach into the drive aisle. And this is this area right in here that we're talking about, if you can see my pointer. Staff is recommending the northern row of parking is removed. That's these spots right here. And a planter island is added to guide traffic to avoid conflicts. A minimum of 2 parking spaces are required per UDC standards. A total of 42 spaces exist and or are proposed between the proposed use and the existing 9,500 square foot retail building on the east side of this site. Even with removal of the row of parking previously mentioned, there are still twice as many parking spaces as required. Conceptual building elevations were submitted as shown that incorporate a mix of materials consisting of hardy plank, cement lap siding, Akoya wood siding, and glazing. Per the development agreement, some of the same design elements are required to be incorporated into the commercial portion of the development as in the residential portion. Final design is required to be consistent with the provisions in the development agreement and with the design standards in the architectural standards manual. So these elevations are not approved with this application. They're only conceptual. Written testimony has been received from Marla Carson, the applicant's representative. She requests they be able to retain the 5 northern parking spaces as employee parking. Staff does not support this request as stated previously because there isn't enough room spatially for the one-way drive aisle to access the parking and escape lane and the stacking lane for the drive-through. Parallel parking may be an option in this area for employees instead. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions in the staff report.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward?
The applicant is
This
online, I
online.
believe, tonight, Madam Chair.
Marla, you should have permission to unmute yourself and turn on your camera if you'd like.
Good evening. This is Marla Carson, architect at 725 East 2nd Street in Meridian.
Thank you. We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my screen?
It looks like it's coming up.
Okay, I'm here tonight to ask approval for CUP for a coffee kiosk at 4474 North Park Crossing. The location, as Sonia stated, is the southwest corner of McMillan and Locust Grove. The same owner of the property has already been approved and constructed a retail building on the corner of the property. The scope of the work for this project is a pad site ready site as shown here. We are requesting that we may be able to retain these 5 parking spaces that could be shared with the stacking for the drive-through. I believe code does have allowance saying that the stacking lane shall be a separate lane from circulation lanes needed for access and parking, except stacking lanes may provide access to staff parking. So that's what we're asking. We do exceed the needs for the parking requirement, but this coffee shop only requires 2 parking spaces, and we can see there being 4 or 5 employees that could use these spaces and just keep the flexibility for this retail space as different tenants come and go, allow enough parking for everyone. Also, there's no real street parking in the area, so we're thinking if we provide plenty of parking, that's going to prevent overflow into this neighborhood just to the south of the property. Here's our preliminary floor plan for the project. There's not going to be indoor seating, but we will have patio seating. And here's our preliminary elevations using similar materials to the existing building. And then this kind of shows what the existing building looks like, the retail space. There's a Shapes Fitness in there and a Precision hardwood floors in there right now. That completes my presentation.
Any questions for the applicant or staff? With that, Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to testify on this application?
Madam Chair, we do not.
That being said, is there anyone in the room who would like to testify on this application or on Zoom? Okay. Could I get a motion to close, and I'm assuming with that, the applicant has no other comments?
Correct.
Going once, going twice for questions. Can I get a motion to close the public hearing on H-2021-0037?
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on H-2021-0037. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair,
That's it. Commissioner Grove.
been real quick. I see not a lot with this. Going to be a busy location. Having lived in this area before, there's a lack of coffee. Definitely be a welcome sight over there. I could go either way with the parking. I tend to agree with staff when they have concerns, though.
Any other thoughts?
Madam Chair.
concerns? Commissioner Yearsley.
I think it works. I think it looks good. I do agree with staff. I think that parking needs to go. I think it's just going to be a conflict with people driving through with trying to park there. So I think it makes sense to leave it the way it with the conditions of removing those parking spaces.
I would tend to agree, even if they were clearly marked employee would be the only way, but man, I get nervous sitting in drive-throughs where it is butted up right against where somebody's just begging to back out. And everybody's stuck. So I would tend to agree with staff on that as well. Additional comments, motions,
Sure.
Commissioner Grove.
After considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to approve file number H-2021-0037 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 1st, 2021, with no modifications.
Second.
I was gonna say, is it written the way you?
May I clarify, the staff report required removal of the 5 northern parking spaces. May I clarify if parallel parking may be considered at the time of CZC if it meets dimensional standards, or if you just don't want any parking there at all?
Leave it to staff.
What do you recommend? I'll leave it to staff to make that decision.
It has been, did we get a second?
Yeah.
It has been moved and seconded to approve H-2021-0037 with modifications. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Or was it with modification? Did we end up- Got it. Next on the agenda is item H-2021-0035, the TM Creek Apartments Phase 3. We'll begin with the staff report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Give me just a moment here. The next application before you is a request for a rezone and a conditional use permit. This site currently is zone TNC and CG and is located south of West Franklin Road and east of South 10 Mile Road. Development of this property is governed by the 10 Mile Crossing Development Agreement. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation is mixed use commercial and high density residential in the 10 Mile Interchange specific area plan. The applicant has requested a rezone of 5.5 acres of land from the TNC to the CG zoning district as shown. Most of the area proposed to be rezoned is designated mixed use commercial with a narrow sliver along the east boundary designated as high density residential. The proposed CG zoning and multifamily residential and live work vertically integrated uses are consistent with the future land use map designations for this property. Because the area proposed to be rezoned is governed by the 10 Mile Crossing Development Agreement, a new development agreement or amendment to the existing DA is not recommended. A conditional use permit is requested for a multifamily residential development consisting of 238 apartment units on 7.83 acres of land in the CG zoning district. A variety of studio, 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom, and live work units are proposed. The gross density is 30.4 units per acre. A total of 1,815 square feet of non-residential uses are proposed in the vertically integrated and residential structure, which is a principally permitted use in the CG zoning district and will allow a variety of commercial uses. The vertically integrated residential use is proposed at the corner where the private streets intersects Wayfinder. There are 2 live work units proposed. The remainder of the building frontage to the south along Wayfinder is proposed to be entirely multifamily residential. This area was previously planned for commercial uses along this street. The applicant has requested alternative compliance to UDC 114327B3 to provide a lesser amount of private open space for each unit as noted in the staff report, and to UDC table 113C6, which doesn't include a requirement for parking for studio units to allow the vertically integrated residential standards to apply. The director has approved these requests as stated in the staff report. Access is proposed via a private street from Wayfinder Avenue, a collector street along the west boundary of the site. With approval of alternative compliance, a minimum of 372 parking spaces are required. A total of 379 spaces are proposed. Based on the size of the living area in the proposed units, all between 500 and 1,200 square feet, a minimum of 1.37 acres of common open space is required to be provided within the development. A total of 2.51 acres is proposed. Although some of this area doesn't qualify, i.e. private open space along Wayfinder and is not really usable, some of the parking lot planners, the internal common open space and area along the 10 Mile Creek is 2.2 acres, which exceeds UDC standards. And that 2.2 acres you can see is contained within the red dotted line here. So the other area is what consists of the 2.51 acres shown on the open space exhibit. Based on 238 units, a minimum of 5 amenities are required, but the decision-making body is authorized to consider additional amenities if they believe the proposed amenities aren't adequate for the size of the development. The applicant is proposing a clubhouse with a fitness center, bike repair room, and pet grooming station, a swimming pool, open grassy areas of at least 50 feet by 100 feet in size, fireside seating, grilling area, and sports courts, snookball and ping pong. The 10 Mile Creek multi-use pathway also lies adjacent to the site for residents to use. An 8-foot wide pathway is proposed along the north side of the creek as shown on the concept plan. Conceptual building elevations were submitted for the proposed 4-story structures as shown. Building materials consist of stucco and brick in neutral colors. Final design is required to comply with the adopted 10 Mile Crossing design guidelines. Written testimony has been received from Mike Wardle, the applicant's representative. He requests condition number 4H, which requires the sidewalk along the southern boundary of the site adjacent to the 10 Mile Creek to be widened to 10 feet to qualify as a multi-use pathway as recommended by the Parks Department as a condition of approval of the alternative compliance request to the private open space standards, to be changed to require an 8-foot wide pathway as proposed. And that is this pathway right here along the southern boundary that we're talking about. And deletion of condition number 8, which requires a public pedestrian easement for the multi-use pathway to be deleted since an easement isn't required for non-public pathways as proposed by the applicant. A revision is also requested to condition number 9 to remove the language pertaining to compliance with the design guidelines in the 10-mile interchange specific area plan and the design standards in the architectural standards manual to reflect compliance with the 10-mile crossing design guidelines as required by the development agreement. That was a typo in the staff report, so staff is in agreement with that requested change. Staff is recommending approval with the conditions in the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions.
Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, Josh Beach, Brighton Homes, 2929 West Navigator Drive here in Meridian. So we have should have a slideshow. Get put up there. Nice to see you all in person again.
Welcome back.
Yeah, you know, been here a couple of times, I think, so. Muscle memory, right? Made it. Thank you. Maybe. So good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. So as Sonia stated, hopefully I can move this forward. Can I not, Sonia? Click with the mouse. Okay, next slide there, Sonia, if you would. So as recommended by staff and then in the pre-application meeting, they recommended that we rezone that portion of TNC to CG to be consistent with the area and what we're proposing. And so don't have much else to say in terms of the rezone, other than it does comply with the comprehensive plan and with our overall development agreement. So we were okay with making that application. Moving on to the conditional use permit, Sonia, if you'll move forward. So as you can see here on the slide, this is what will be the third phase of the apartments. There's the lofts and the flats just to the south, and this would be phase 3, which is north of what we're calling the amenity corridor, the 10-mile creek there, with the 10-mile multi-use pathway being on the south side of the creek, and the gravel access road for the irrigation district being on the north side. One of the reasons why in that condition of approval that we asked to be modified, there is a multi-use pathway on the south side. So in our minds, it didn't make sense to have another multi-use pathway on the north side, especially because the access road for the irrigation district is located there, and they typically don't like to have them on both sides. So that's one of the reasons. So Sonia, if you move forward again. So there's a site plan, as Sonia said, there's 238 what we're calling urban style multifamily units, kind of a breakdown there of the unit count and the sizes. Sonia, if you move forward again for me. So one of the cool things about this is we have some live work units, which is something that there's a lot of in Meridian. Very excited about that. And you can see here on the left for Wayfinder that we've put some on-street parking. It's already constructed there, on-street parking for those businesses so that they can be better utilized by customers. And typically those live work units are used by professionals, right? Your architects, things like that, where they can have their office downstairs and live upstairs. So hoping that goes well here. Sonia, will you move forward again for me? So Sonia's mentioned open space. We've got just over 2.5 acres of qualified open space, which is about 32% of the site. It consists of landscape buffers in the landscape area around what we're calling the central amenity core, as you can see there south of the central building, and then the landscaping again adjacent to the 10-mile creek corridor. Sonia. So as Sonia mentioned as well, there are quite a few amenities for the project. These photos were taken from the Flats project, which is just to the south of this proposed site. You know, one of my coworkers was gracious enough to take some photos of that for me, so I could put them in the slide. So there's a workout room, there's a yoga studio, pet grooming, lots of seating areas inside there, a game room. It's very cool, actually, the size and all of the different amenities that are just within the clubhouse. Next slide, Sonia. Oh, back one. There you go. So outside, so in addition to the amenities that are inside the clubhouse, there's a year-round spa and a pool, some grilling areas and seating areas around the patio, lounges, snook ball, outdoor yoga, outdoor ping pong, and these really cool fire tables. You've seen those probably at the village and other places. You know, they add some warmth and some heat to the area so folks can gather around those. Sonia. Going back to the pathways a little bit more, you know, this pathway that's there is labeled as A, or the 10 Mile Creek and 10 Mile Road Regional Pathway, goes along the south side of that amenities corridor, the 10 Mile Creek, but it's going to connect to a large pathway network just in the 10 Mile Creek area. And we're excited that, you know, this section of that will be just a internal circulation, that 8-foot pathway that we'll have there, but eventually there'll be pathways throughout the whole area. As you can see there, about 3.5 miles of 8 and 10-foot pathways. So it'll be relatively easy to connect just about anywhere in the area, just with walking. Sonia went through these a little bit. I'm not going to touch much on these, but these are the architectural elevations of the buildings. The next slide there, Sonia. Again, it's more perspectives. And again, we're complying with what was approved in our DA for the 10 Mile Creek design guidelines. So they're a little different than the design guidelines for the rest of the city, as well as the 10 Mile Interchange specific area plan. We had our own guidelines approved earlier this year. So we'll comply with those, Sonia. And as Sonia said, there's a few conditions of approval. One would be 4H, which is, again, that's what we had originally proposed as a 7-foot pathway, would be an 8-foot sidewalk along the south side of the project, which is on the north side of 10 Mile Creek for internal circulation. And as you know, that's not a public pathway. An easement would not be required for that, which is why we asked that condition 8 be removed as well. And then, as Sonia said, the typo there with the 10 Mile Interchange specific area plan, and this project would meet the 10 Mile Creek design guidelines. Next slide there, Sonia. That's all I had in terms of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions on the project that you may have.
Before we get into a whole lot of questions here, Sonia, can you put that last slide back up? We've got that. Thank you. Okay, any questions for the applicant or staff?
Lots.
Go for it.
Mr.
I'll
Gazanelli.
knock them down. Josh, on the amenities, are these different than the other buildings, or are they pretty much duplicates? And then is there sharing of the amenities from one building? So the lofts and the flats, can they go to the different pools, et cetera?
So the amenities are slightly different, but we have some themes, right? There's the workout room with the Rogue equipment and the outdoor games. We've tried to change those up a little bit in terms of what outdoor, like ping pong or snook ball or things like that, are a little bit different. But there wouldn't be sharing between the different projects of amenities, right? Each apartment development will have its own amenities, and we restricted to those tenants of that.
Okay.
Anyone else?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Yurtseven?
So you kind of tout this as a live work facility, but yet only two of the units are a live work. Why not add more?
That'd be a John question.
Good evening, Commissioners. For the record, my name is John Wardle, 2929 West Navigator Drive, Meridian, Idaho. Commissioner Yearsley, thank you for asking the question about the live work. We haven't seen it done very successfully as of yet, but we felt like this was a good opportunity to do it. And we took the 2 units that were closest to that private drive to be able to do that. We will look for other opportunities, but we felt like this was a good opportunity to try it and make sure that it works. A lot of times those live work units are converted back to just residential. But we're hopeful that we can make this work and do it in other places as well.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher.
I had a question, and this might because it hasn't come up during my time on the commission, but did I read it right or see it right that there's going to be no parking for the studio apartments for the 42 units? Is that correct?
Correct. There's, at the time, there wasn't a requirement for studio parking. We have provided some parking for them, but there isn't a requirement in the code, or there wasn't at the time.
If I can clarify that, we actually are providing parking 1 unit per studio. Sorry, for the record, John Wardle again. 1 per studio, which is actually in compliance now with the UDC amendment that's coming through as well. Currently, there wasn't a designation for studio units. It was 1 bedroom and it was 1.5. But in this case, the bedroom and the units all integrated. So we've asked for 1 unit or 1 stall per unit on the studios. So they will have parking dedicated 1 space.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli.
Josh, is the number of units here, is it consistent with the original development agreement?
In terms of the number of apartment units allowed in the overall development?
Correct.
I don't know that we've reached the threshold of how many are allowed. And so I'm not sure if I understand the question specifically. There aren't like a specific number of apartments allowed for a specific apartment development.
And maybe Sonia, I don't know if you.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, there wasn't a specific number. It's what's allowed in the mixed use commercial designation, and I believe it's no more than 30%, I believe. I'd have to double check.
Yeah, Madam Chair, members of the commission, if you recall, when the applicant came forward with their recent DA mod and design guidelines, this area was slated for additional residential, if I'm not mistaken. And that's why they're rezoning it to CG as well, to allow for that through a conditional use permit. So again, as Sonia gets that number for you, I don't believe we capped them to any certain number. But if you also recall, they also own some additional residential that we anticipate them coming back and platting and doing, and possibly providing you more design guidelines for the residential component of this development that's further to the east of this site. So right now, again, what Sonia said to you, this plan is consistent with the land use designation and that DA modification that was recently approved.
Madam Chair, quickly, if I could, our understanding is that there was a minimum threshold for residential in the development agreement, and that we've already met that and exceeded the minimum requirement for residential.
Okay. And Madam Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli.
And this may be for staff, but as far as parking, are we, or what are we, I'm a little confused on the alternative compliance and changing up the parking spaces, but do we still have ample parking in there? I see there's a minimum of 372 with a total of 379, but with the alternative compliance, do we still have enough parking?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casanelli, yes, we do. There's in excess of UDC standard. The funky thing about this is, like the applicant mentioned, staff does have a text amendment in process right now. The current UDC does not specifically have a parking standard for studio parking. It's not that we don't require it. It just, I think, was inadvertently left out for studios. So what the applicant's proposing as alternative compliance is consistent with what staff is recommending as a text amendment currently in process. So there are extra spaces provided above the requirements.
Okay, and kind of to piggyback on that, has there been a problem with parking in the existing complexes that would suggest that we need more parking?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casanelli, not that I'm aware of. The applicant may be able to answer that. I'm not aware of any issues.
How are the existing buildings handling the parking? I'm Chair, Commissioner Casanelli. I'm not aware of any concerns either. I mean, John can address that more, but.
Sorry, we put Josh on the spot tonight without, perhaps the knowledge of the project. So the lofts project is complete. We're fully occupied and we don't have a parking issue. We would know that pretty quickly because of the spillover into primary health and into some of the other services there as well. We feel like the parking works, and we also have garages and things like that. So there is not a parking issue. We're very comfortable with the standards that we've met, and we've been consistent with the flats and now this phase 3 across the creek. So the parking seems to be working really well.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Lorcher?
is this the first 4-story apartment building for Brighton?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Lorcher, actually, this is out at 10 Mile. This is the third project with 4-story buildings. So the flats and the lofts both had 4. We have other projects as well where we've done 4 and 5 stories. The thing that's interesting here, in typical garden style, it's just walk up from outside into the building in different stairwells. This one's completely conditioned. And so you come into conditioned spaces, corridors that are internal. So you kind of we've eliminated those external stairways from the project. The live works a little different because you can walk right into it from the street, but the rest of the buildings are internal corridors with a number of elevators as well.
Madam Chair, do we have anyone signed up to testify on this application?
Madam Chair, we do not.
That being said, is there anyone in the room who wishes to testify on this application or on Zoom? Okay. Does the applicant have any further comments then, being no public testimony? Okay.
Madam Chair?
Oh, sure.
Madam Chair, John Wardle. I just wanted to speak quickly about the pathway and the sidewalk. So we established a long time ago with Nampa Meridian Irrigation District that the public sidewalk or pathway would be on the south side, and their maintenance, which is a gravel access, is on the north side, north and west, as we work through the project. So that starts at Franklin Road and will carry all the way through and ultimately connect with the regional pathway that the city has planned over by 12 Oaks, and I'm trying to remember the other subdivisions over there. The sidewalk that we're proposing on the north side is for internal circulation. Obviously, we want them to be able to come down to the creek, but they won't have direct access to it unless they go out to Wayfinder. Just to the south of that, we will continue the gravel access for Nampa Meridian Irrigation District. So I just wanted to distinguish between those. This is not a public regional pathway that exists on the south side, and we're going to continue that all the way through. This is just for internal circulation coming out of those buildings for residents to move back and forth. Now, could the public access it? Obviously they would, but this is not the regional pathway. And that's why we're making the distinction here and asking for that sidewalk on the north, the regional pathway on the south.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Yearsley.
So I understand the designation and I'm fine with that, but do you have an issue of just leaving it at 10 feet instead of 8, or is there not enough room to make 10 feet in there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Yearsley, we actually do have a little bit of grade issue there. On the second phase, well, across our first project, but when we did the gravel access on the north side, it sits pretty low in comparison to where the terrain is up above. So we're going to have some terracing, some bouldering that's going to be there. We'd prefer to keep it at 8 just to give us enough room to stay back from that. So that's the reason we requested it to be 8.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli.
Sonia, can we get your little bit additional input on that? Going from 10 down to 8 and why you want 10?
Yes, the Parks Department recommended 10 feet as a provision of approving the applicant's request for alternative compliance to the private open space standards, a reduction to those. It's not a giant deal in staff's opinion, but that was the Parks Department's recommendation.
And
As the
yet
applicant
the,
says, there is a multi-use pathway on the south side of the 10 Mile Creek.
yeah, so I mean, the Parks Department they were clear on that, the understanding of that the multi-use pathway is on the south side. Okay. And then I had a question, and John, I think you answered it. There's separation between the sidewalk, whether it be 8 feet or 10 feet, and the gravel access. Is it fence? You mentioned, I think, some bouldering. So there's a definite separation there?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casanelli, as we've looked at the design, yes, there will be a separation. There will be boulders that will have to retain some of it. Will it be the entire distance? No, but it drops quite a bit coming off a wayfinder where that gravel access is. So I would expect that we would be stepping back and a couple layers of boulder walls to make sure that that transition is not too steep and severe between the gravel access road and where the site would be.
So there's, I mean, then would you classify that as kind of a natural fence? Or is it, I mean, is there going to be any kind of fencing between those two?
We haven't had to fence it as of yet. On the other side, we have a similar condition, and given the way we've been able to step it back, it's not a hazard. But we will need to look at that as we get out there and do a final civil analysis of it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Could I get a motion to close the public hearing on 2021-0035 TM Creek Apartments?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on H-2021-0035. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. I'll jump off. I don't see a big deal of leaving that an 8-foot sidewalk instead of 10, and I think they have plenty of amenities and open space, and being able to do some decent design work around there, I think is just as important as having maybe the other 2 feet, especially on an internal circulation. Other than that, I mean, it looks compatible with everything that else is around there.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Grove.
Echo your sentiments on this. I'd also like to point out one of the things that came through a while back with this project was the lack of a gathering plaza, as they put it. And they have that on one of the maps that they showed of the overall project out there. So I think that is greatly appreciated. Having kind of tying in all of these developments together. I know that's not directly tied to this, but it does help. I particularly like the amenities that they have, and the large open space. It looks like it'll fit in well with what they've already done. The project overall, I don't have any problems with it, and I'm okay with the modifications that they've presented.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Yearsley.
for the most part, I'm okay with it. Apartments never really excite me. I have to apologize for that comment, but you know, you don't think 2 feet's a lot, but for a 10-foot sidewalk, if you've got 2 groups walking against each other, 8 feet feels very narrow. And so I still have a tendency to call it a sidewalk and not a pathway, but still leave it at 10 feet instead of 8, just to make it with that many, you know, 200 and some homes, you know, you're going to have a lot of people out there wanting to walk and stuff like that. And so you're going to have people walk in different directions, people on bikes. Having that extra 2 feet does provide a lot better access and safer.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Lorcher.
I guess my only comment with Commissioner Yearsley is that if it's connecting to another pathway or sidewalk, would it, if it was already 10 and then it's going to go to 8 and then it's going to get a 10 again, or it's going to be 8 and then widen out to 10, whatever they choose, it should be consistent. Unless it doesn't connect to anything.
Sonia, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think it connects to anything, does it?
Madam Chair, not at this time. Brighton also owns the land and will be developing it to the east of this property, though.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Lorcher.
So on the flats and on the lofts, they have, do they have the 8-foot sidewalks on those projects, or are they 10?
Madam
go-
Chair, I don't believe there's anything north of the creek that's developed at this time.
Can you go back a slide to that? I think the previous slide was the pathways. Madam Chair.
Commissioner Castanelli.
Normally, initially I was going to say I would be okay with 8 foot, but Commissioner Yearsley brought up the number of apartments, and I agree. You know, even 2 people, you know, 2 groups of 2 come and hit on 8 feet is not enough. I mean, you know, you kind of need to move a little bit, and with bikes as well. With that many residences, it's not part of the pathway system. But I think given the number there, that I almost feel that 10 feet is, it would just make for more comfort there. I understand that the applicant has a little bit of a space issue there, trying to get the boulders in there and whatnot, and then get the access for the irrigation district, but I think they can do it. So I think I'm kind of leaning towards that. I also want to make a comment on the live work, and Commissioner Yearsley asked the question, why only 2? I like live work. To me, it almost seems like if you put just 2 in, why bother? Because it's not going to attract, you know, if it was a dozen in there, it might attract enough people coming in to be there. They're in there. It's being approved, I guess, you know. And the applicant even said that they could be converted in the future back to just standalone residences. But yeah, I would like to see, because I like the idea of, I've seen, you know, live work spaces in different parts of the country where it's real vibrant when they're there. So I would love to see more is my issue there. But getting back to the pathways, I would probably have to go with 10.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Grove.
just to jump in on the sidewalk aspect, having looked, you know, driven around that area before, there's quite a bit of elevation change right along that area. And so I would be hesitant to force the 10 foot without having them, you know, take another look at it, I guess, with staff potentially, maybe wording what we pass as a recommendation versus a ultimatum.
I guess I would tend to agree with Commissioner Kastner. I'm actually surprised that the live work hasn't been successful in other projects, but because I think going forward, it might be a more desirable aspect. And since a lot, we are taking away, it is kind of a commercial area. I wouldn't mind seeing more, like you said, they can always be converted back. It's easy. I would imagine it's easier to convert them back. I don't know.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I would, I don't know if I would condition more, but I would recommend more. I think it might be, again, it's kind of hard to say if it'll work or not, but, I would like to actually see it a little bit more with that. And my opinion with the 8 foot for the 10 foot, just give their civil engineers a little bit more to work on.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Grove.
I don't think I've ever said this before, but I don't know if I completely agree with even wanting more of the mixed use, just because of how much other commercial is in this general area. I'm usually a huge fan of having additional mixed use integrated, but I don't know. I guess I wouldn't be opposed to having more, but I don't see the absolute need for it because of how much commercial office space is out there.
I think whoever makes the motion can
Sonia?
wordsmith.
Sonia, would you put that section back up? Madam Chair,
Commissioner Yearsley.
after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council of file number H 2021-0035 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 1st, 2021, with the following modifications. That condition H or 4-H be modified to read, widen the sidewalk along the southern border to the site to 10 feet. To strike condition 8, to not require that it be in an easement, and to modify condition 9 as shown on the screen. That's acceptable to Sonia for the last one.
Clarification, Madam Chair, Commissioner Yearsley, if you're wanting the sidewalk to be widened to 10 feet, that is the typical width for a multi-use public pathway. Are you sure you want to remove that requirement for a public pedestrian easement? Because that's typically required with a multi-use pathway.
I don't know, like I said, I'm okay calling it a sidewalk, but just conditioning it to be 10 feet wide.
Thank you.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to approve H 2021-0035 with modifications. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, we will continue from June 3rd, H 2021-0015 Woodcrest Townhomes, and we'll begin with the staff report.
Madam Chair. Alrighty, the last item before you tonight is a request for a comprehensive plan future land use map amendment and a rezone. This site consists of 1.97 acres of land. It's zoned LO limited office and is located at 1789 North Hickory Way, north of East Fairview Avenue on the southwest side of Hickory Way. This property was annexed with LO zoning in 1992 and was later re-subdivided as a lot in Mullane Commercial Complex in 2001. The comprehensive plan future land use map designation currently is commercial. The applicant requests an amendment to the comprehensive plan future land use map to change the land use designation on 2.10 acres of land from commercial to medium high density residential, and a rezone of 2.1 acres of land from the LO limited office to the R15 medium high density residential zoning district. Approval of the map amendment will allow the applicant to develop 19 single-family residential attached and townhome dwellings at a gross density of 10.8 units per acre on this infill property, which will contribute to the range of residential land use designations and diversity in housing types and densities in this area, and provide a transition in land uses from medium density residential to commercial and office uses to the south. A conceptual site plan and building elevations were submitted showing how the property is planned to develop with 19 single-family attached and townhouse dwellings consisting of 1 single-family attached structure, 3 unit townhomes, and 2 4-unit townhouses, and a 2,500 square foot office building. The property is planned to be subdivided through a future application. Because this is an infill property and has an irregular configuration, development of this site is difficult. The parking proposed for the office building at the southeast corner of the site encroaches within the required land use buffer and does not comply with UDC standards. The comprehensive plan states development in medium high density residential designated areas should incorporate high quality architectural and site design to ensure quality of place, and incorporate connectivity with adjacent uses and pathways, and include attractive landscaping and a project identity. To achieve this goal and alleviate some of the spatial constrictions on the site, staff recommended the concept plan be revised to remove the office building from the plan and instead include open space with quality landscaping and some parking, pathway connections to the open space, and the provision of a gazebo with a seating area as an amenity, which can be shared between the residential and commercial development to the south. The applicant did revise the concept plan as shown on the right, and staff is in support of the proposed changes. Access to the site is proposed via a cross-access easement from an existing driveway from Hickory Way, a collector street. No stub streets exist to this property. A private street is planned to provide access to the proposed development and for addressing purposes. An attached sidewalk is proposed along one side of the private street for pedestrian access. Off-street parking is proposed in accord with UDC standards. 4 extra spaces are proposed for guest parking in the common area near the entry, and 5 spaces are proposed in the common area at the southeast corner of the site. On-street parking is not allowed due to the width of the private street. Because the site is below 5 acres in size, qualified open space and site amenities are not required by the UDC. Conceptual building elevations were submitted for the proposed residential structures as shown, with a mix of materials consisting of horizontal wood siding, vertical board and batten siding, wood shake siding, and cement plaster with stone veneer accents, and architectural asphalt roofing. There has been no written testimony submitted on this application. Staff is recommending approval of the revised concept plan and is recommending a development agreement with the provisions noted in the staff report. Staff will stand for any questions.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to come forward?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the commission. My name is Blaine Womer of Womer Engineering. We're at 4355 West Emerald Street in Boise, Suite 145. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this project before you this evening. We also want to thank Sonia for her efforts in getting us here as well. We are in receipt of the staff report and we've reviewed it with the client. And we do agree, we concur with the findings and the recommendations in the staff report. We're just here to answer any questions you might have.
Any questions for the applicant or staff?
Madam Chair.
Mr. Castanelli.
This is more for staff. Sonia, is this I don't know if you recall, maybe Bill, maybe you do. A couple of years ago, we were looking at a development. I think it was on this piece. And it was some, medium density residential. I think there was I'm kind of surprised there wasn't a single public comment. There was a lot that time. Can you, if you recall that one, can you speak to how this is different?
Absolutely, I recall it. Chair and I discussed it this afternoon at our prep meeting. So Madam Chair, members of the commission, yes, back in 2017, an application came before this body for a conditional use permit for a multifamily development. And that included 40 apartments. And there was 2-story and 3-story apartments, garden style apartments on this property. The difference here tonight is that this is not a multifamily development. Well, let me step back a little bit. With that multifamily development came requirements for open space and amenities to go along with that density. As you're aware, the city denied that request, and that rezone and that CUP did not move forward. This applicant, this property owner has been trying to sell this property since then and hasn't been very successful. And so we met with this applicant and they brought forth another plan to go residential. Now, we did share with them the history of this site and what happened back 4 years ago. And they assured us that it is their intent to come forward with a subdivision, subdivide the property and build townhomes on this site. So that's really the distinction, is townhomes are treated more like single family. I mean, multifamily, it's all residential in our code. We don't try to differentiate between residential and residential. But the stigmatism between multifamily and townhomes is a little different. So I think that's probably why you're not getting the public comments you are, because this is not a multifamily development. This is a townhome development that they'll again come back, subdivide it, create an open space that they don't need to provide. But at the recommendation of staff, we felt it was appropriate to provide that transition. If there are people living there, having their own private backyards, it would be nice to have some kind of amenity for the overall development, so that you do kind of soften that commercial parking from the residential living units. So really that's the difference, is this time completely different use, a new use, less zoning. I believe they were asking for R40, if I'm not mistaken. And this particular applicant is requesting R15. And as you can see by the proposed concept plan, it does provide a nicer transition to the single family to the north.
They will be individual ownership units.
Will they be, no, I'm sure, I'm sorry. What kind of a setback from the rear property line? Because I know that was a concern too back then, and it sounds like part of it, as Bill addressed, there was 3-story there and only 2 here. But what is the setback from the rear?
We don't have it dimensioned on this conceptual exhibit, but I think we're in the 15 to 20 rear yard.
Okay.
25 on some of them, actually.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Yearsley.
So just so I clarify, we're talking about each individual home would be a separate owner, not each building, correct?
Correct. These will have individual lots.
Okay.
And there'll be ownership.
Okay. So looking at the concept plans, I have to admit, I'm a little concerned about the 4 townhomes together being adjacent to the I think that's to the residence. And it just concerns me because the mass on that just seems really big. I was wondering if that might be something to consider, swapping that around a little bit to maybe break that up a little bit more.
Absolutely. Well, this is a concept plan. We brought it here so that the commission could kind of get a feel for what we're going to be back to you with. And certainly we can take your comments and try to incorporate everything we can to accommodate.
Any other questions for the applicant or staff? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Casanelli.
On what is directly to the south? Is that the bank? Is that?
Directly to the south is the Italian restaurant.
Okay. Louis.
Louis, yes. The bank is to the east.
Okay.
Sorry. I was looking at a map. Louise is right here.
So so directly to the south is their parking lot.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Clerk, do we have anybody signed up to testify on this application?
Madam Chair, we have one person signed in to testify, and that is Dave M.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Dave McDonald, 2579 East Grapewood. I'm also well aware of the history of that previous meeting, so I can fill in some of the blanks. This is the second best project that I've ever seen proposed on this property. If it was a professional office, that would be the only thing that would beat this out. I am a proponent of legal certainty and not flipping zones on a whim. However, coming back to the question of R15, the previous proposal was splitting the zoning of the properties adjacent to my home as R15. So changing the zone to R15 can still put a foot in the door if you flip the zone. One of our worst fears is the project for Village Apartments that has been extended from 2015 by Devco on Eagle Road. They are still putting their foot in the door and dragging that out. So if you flip the zone, it stays empty because the housing market goes south. That would be bad. But if you do have the ability to propose the time limit and make sure the project is completed in a timely fashion, that would be desirable. And as someone who's been maintaining that green grass strip, I would be very happy for the new owners to take care of that green grass strip. And as someone adjacent to an empty field that I'm worried is going to catch on fire in a few days, I'd like to see that go. So empty land would be a desirable thing, but not putting a foot in the door for the previous project to get their foot in the door would be an undesirable thing. However, I've given out the handout, and there's always a lingering concern that's shared from this project to the next one. And, one of the things that I spoke with ACHD was that you can put conditions on time. You can put conditions on safety issues. And I illustrate that Hickory Road is an abnormally busy road, even though it meets standard by ACHD. It's at the bottom level of standard. The speed study has said we do qualify for traffic calming measures. Those are some safety concerns. We did successfully get the light in at the entrance to Hickory off of Fairview, simply because of how busy this road is and the speed constraints. That's why we do not have any memorial crosses at that intersection. We do still need markers along Hickory Way because of the speed and the traffic for no parking. So talking to ACHD, they said, if we can't get a development agreement or this process, come back to me. But I wanted to be on record that there are real safety concerns on this stretch of road. You can go 2 miles out from this project and you will not see any collector road leading into a subdivision with this traffic. 2 miles. I just want to be sure that you're safety concerns. All those things being said, excuse me, are minor costs. I mean, there are issues with the sidewalk that need to be fixed because of the TDS fiber optic issues that damage the sidewalk. Those can be easy fixed. With the 40% decrease in lumber prices, he can absorb the cost of signage and safety concerns for his development. But I just wanted to propose that whatever you decide, whether you propose, recommend or denial or modifications, that you state the reasons for yes, no modifications or whatever, that it's on the record. And to be aware that there are safety concerns that I'm wanting to make sure are on the record. To the developer. I hope this project completes, that I won't have to listen to the construction noise and the dust forever, that there there is a time limit on construction. Also, I would like the developer to talk a little bit about the concerns of the masonry wall maintenance, the maintenance of the amenities. Some of us work from home, these high-speed internet. All of those services run between the masonry wall and our property lines of that 257-foot shared border. So we just want to make sure that those discussions are had. One way or
Thank you. Madam Clerk, anybody else signed up to testify?
Madam Chair, no one else has signed in.
That being said, we'll have the applicant come back after all the questions are proposed. Yes, ma'am, in the green shirt. I know you had your hand up earlier. Go ahead. Just state your name and address for the record as you get to the mic.
My name is Shirley Moon. My address 2834 East Clarine Drive, Meridian. And good evening to all of you. My voice is a little bit scared of you. Anyway, I live in Solterra, and I was here 4 years ago. I was here for all the drama 4 years ago. And we as homeowners totally appreciated the view and the decision then that was made. It was rejected. And one thing that was not mentioned this evening was how do they get into this property? And I don't know if any of you have ever eaten at Louis, but part of the property that's being proposed, Louis customers park on that property. So there's a parking problem when the restaurant fills up. But the interesting thing about this project is there's no through streets. It's all business driveways. It's not streets. And then they proposed off-street parking. Well, Hickory Way is already, it's totally busy. In the mornings, the traffic gets backed up from Fairview. Eagle Road and Fairview Road have been declared the busiest streets in all of Ada County. And yet Hickory Way is probably less than a quarter of a mile from there. So when the traffic proceeds on Fairview going west, the traffic light on Hickory Way will stop the traffic and it backs up all the way to Eagle. So it's a tremendous problem. 4 years ago, when we spoke about the parking problem, there wasn't the mass of apartments and homes that have been built between Hickory and Locust Grove. That whole area is it looks like a frenzy of building. And so all that affects us. So proposing, last time was 70 buildings, 70 homes. I don't remember if it was apartments or whatever. So we figured in our homeowners association, Solterra, we have 89 homes. So we figured that's about 180 to 200 cars going in and out all day. So directly across the street that they propose on the information that I have, Solterra runs right into the parking lot, directly access to this. And so it's like they haven't solved, it seems like to me, they haven't solved the parking problem. And there's just a lot. And on one of these maps, my profession was medical, so there's some terms that I don't understand, but I can read a map. And on here, it says direct parcel access to North Hickory or Fairview is prohibited. So are they going to make a new street? Are they going to use the driveway that's directly across from us on Solterra? And so here's our traffic, 200 cars coming and going every day. It's a working neighborhood. And then I think 19, so 20, so maybe that's 40 or 50 more cars. Hickory is already already has a problem. There is an island on the corner of Hickory Way and Fairview, and ACHD said they're going to take that out, but that's not until 2024. So that's 3 more years. So I spoke to an ACHD person this last week about our parking problems. And he said the city allowed narrow streets, providing there was compliance with no parking on one side of the street. And when our people come in and park, if 2 large trucks park across the street from each other, then it becomes a city violation because the street is too narrow, just because of that. So it's really horrendous for us to think that maybe there's going to be more parking. We have people that are now doubling up in homes because of the price of rent. We have, I'm on the board, and we have one home that has 3 families living with them, and there was 7 cars with this 3 families. So each home theoretically should only have 4 cars, 2 in the garage and 2 on the pad. But 3 extra cars just for one family, that was even a problem.
Could, ma'am, your time is up. Could you?
Okay, so mostly I am here because of the parking, and they have not stated to you, or maybe I didn't hear, where is their entrance? And their entrance goes right into business driveways, not streets. And they're going to build 19 homes using business driveways.
Thank you. Love
Okay.
the applicant. answer
Yeah,
the question.
okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to testify? Yes, sir.
My name is Randy Nelson. I live at 1873 North Marnita Avenue, also in Solterra. There's going to be some redundancy, but the portrayal that we see here doesn't represent that block where these sets of homes are going in. It is truly access with yard drawing, they've got speed traps on this thing for people to not drive fast through there. So it's truly just a trail to get access into a mortgage company, a couple of things in the back. That isn't the road to put 19 homes in. It's a sham that they think that that's supposed to work. It's dressed up differently, but it's the same problem. Nothing was addressed. You brought that up when you started. 4 years ago, we had problems with all this. Nothing has changed with the access in and out. The safety factors are still there. The busyness, kids, all that's still the same story. We changed the flavor from apartments to townhouses, but that means nothing to the actual on-site problem. I had somebody give me a ride home today. It wasn't going to be any part of this. We went over those 4 speed bumps. We got to the corner where access off Hickory into this place. I says, "Can you see?" He goes, "What do you mean?" He goes, "He can't see down the street." When these people leave their residence, if it gets approved, and I pray it doesn't, they can't see to make turns because it's a serpentine road. That's also part of the problem. It's unsafe to pull out of there. If we're directly across 90 homes coming out, these coming out, they can't see. We have access because the serpentine goes this way. We can see. They cannot see leaving their property clearly. It's going to be, it's an if issue every single time they leave. That isn't brought up here. It's always just glossed and nice and pretty and good access and blah, blah. It isn't there. Nothing's changed from 4 years ago. It's still a landlocked, odd cheap piece of property that doesn't have a good road to it. It's not legal, it's access to business. They want to call that, have something, it's not the right thing.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, sir. Yeah. You have to come up to the microphone and state your name and address. For the record.
Madam Chair, point of order. I understand that you're
Oh.
part of the applicant, possibly the owner. We should probably have the rest of the public testimony.
Yeah,
And then
I'm sorry, I
give
didn't
you a
realize.
chance to rebut. We want
Yeah.
to keep this, you will have an opportunity. We just want to.
Yeah, after all the public testimony, then the applicant's gonna have, you'll have more time to answer all these questions. So yeah, if you're part of the ownership and the applicant, it's probably best if we finish listening to the public testimony. Okay. Anyone else? Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Ann Atarian, address 2875 East Apricot in Meridian. I'm also a resident of Silterra. I'm part of the board. I do echo the sentiments of the two other residents. There is a lot of parking issues in our neighborhood. People unfortunately don't use garages for parking, so they are parking in driveways and what street parking they have. It has spilled over into the Capitol Church parking lot, which we've had to address with our residents because they should not be parking there. I also echo the sentiments about Hickory being a serpentine road. Looking out, going left or right, you do not have a good line of sight with the current foliage, the berm that is in place with one of the office buildings. I'm also a commuter, so I exit off of Hickory onto Fairview. The light there, you will wait for quite a while in the morning or coming home when you are trying to turn right off of Fairview into Hickory. So there is a lot of parking issues. There are road issues. And as they've said, we don't feel any of that is being addressed because there's only the extra parking in those office buildings and the bank buildings and the restaurant around that area. Thank you.
Anyone else in the room or on Zoom that wishes to testify on this application? Yes, sir. And you're with, yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay. If there's no one else for public testimony, would the applicant like to come back? And yeah, if you're part of the applicant's group here, you guys have 10 minutes to explain all the public, answer the public testimony. Yeah.
No.
No. Please state your name and address for the.
My name's Louis Mullane. I've been
And
a
your
resident of
address, please.
Idaho for 62 years.
Sir,
I
could you
bought
give
this
your-
property.
Could you give your address, please, for the record? Your address. Please state your name and address into the microphone. Yeah.
My name is Louis Mullane. I'm at 569 Carnelian Lane, Eagle, Idaho.
Go ahead.
Been in Idaho for 62 years. I bought this property in 1995. It's been for sale since then. As we drew the plans out, we put the road in that all these people are using at 40, 50 miles an hour, that we had to put in those high speed bumps that you recognize that nobody likes, just to slow the traffic down. They're also coming straight through our parking lot to go over to the Blazer building. I don't know if you recognize the Blazer. That's what I know it as, the Blazer building, and outside. And it's freewheeling. It was, the way it was planned, I know, was to go back over through the Hewing property and have back roads. So that, and we're the culprits that received that, and now the people are now going in and out constantly. I've had this property up 3 times. I see different people coming to complain all the time. It is the area, dog poop area legally. That's what my property is, and that's what I'm paying the property taxes on.
Okay.
They come in there, that's where they exercise their dogs and use it. It needs to be something better than this. They're never going to be happy. They know that they have us going, and I'm kind of really tired of it. I'm not a complainer, but the time has come where we need to be able to move on.
Okay.
I can't even get my will going because I'm waiting for this damn stuff. And we're trying to do everything correctly and that everybody wants. We have not put one bit of argument on this. What we're doing wrong, I don't know. We put the wall up for the people next door so that to make those people happy along there. They filled it up with garbage and then said I had to go clean it up. You know, there's a time when I need to be able to get out of this predicament too. And I don't think we've got anything wrong going on. They're never going to be happy. There were the people that were there before, were all different people in these. They taught there's nothing going to happen that's going to hurt anybody. And we can move on. I do have another option. You know, I legally can still turn it back into agriculture and plant. That seems to be the only thing that's going to make anybody happy here, I guess. So if that's where we're at.
Did you want the rest of your team to respond to some of those questions? Please come forward.
Madam Chairman, again, for the record, Blaine Womer, Womer Engineering. I would like to address some of the concerns that have come up this evening. In the conditions of approval for the project, we're going to have to do a development agreement. And if we can mitigate some of the concerns with regard to density, given the past history that, for the record, we had no part of, if we can mitigate some of those concerns by incorporating into the DA a limited number of units at 19, we're happy to do that.
Yeah, I think it would be tied to the conceptual plan that's in the record, wouldn't it, Sonia? Or Bill? Yes. Yeah. So whatever we present here tonight is kind of tied to the pictures you've shown.
Okay, perfect. Then, okay.
Resemble that.
Also, when we had our neighborhood meeting, the only concern really that we heard was traffic, the concerns with regarding traffic. So before we came here tonight, we got together with a traffic engineer. We had him run some numbers based on what we're proposing and what it's currently zoned to allow. And what we found was that the residential development that we're proposing creates approximately 65% of the traffic that it is currently zoned at. So this proposal will actually bring down the number of vehicular trips than what it's currently zoned and what somebody could bring today and be in compliance with the zone. And along those lines, we heard a lot of people talking about parking and where people are parking. This proposal, we have garages for the individual units. Each unit has a garage, 2-car garage, and then the smaller units have 1-car garage. And what we've done is set back the units far enough that people can park in their driveways. They can have guests park in their driveways to mitigate that concern. So, and then I do understand there's some concern about where we're taking our access. That driveway was designed as a part of the entire development. We're conditioned not to go out into Hickory and any other location. So we do need to utilize this driveway that was constructed, and we're going to enhance it, and it's going to be better from a traffic circulation standpoint. But this driveway was put in place and designed in place for the service of the property we're developing. So we're taking the access where we really need to take the access for this particular parcel. And then lastly, as far as some of the maintenance concerns that people have expressed with regard to landscaping, the wall, the project will have an HOA that will be responsible for maintaining all of those aspects of the development. So with that, I hope we've been able to maybe quell some of the concerns, but I'm certainly, again, happy to answer any questions you might have.
So you're accepting the staff's comment to take away the office building, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I think it fits better.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli.
Blaine, do you know, right now, I think coming out that driveway next to the restaurant, that you can still make a left onto Fairview? Is that correct? And is that going away anytime soon? Are you aware of?
I'm not aware. I mean, that would be a better ACHD question. I apologize. I don't have that information.
Yeah. But the way this is laid out, access can go through the businesses there. That is correct?
Correct.
So
There's nothing.
avoiding, they can access Fairview without using Hickory to access these.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Yearsley.
I just wanted to make sure with staff, this is just a rezone and a land use change. In the preliminary plat, we can, at that point, try to address the site distance issues at the entrance at Hickory, correct?
Chairman, commissioners, I'm not sure if I understand your question, but the existing access is there. That's where it's at. And this is what this development is going to share that. It is in alignment with the Solterra Drive access.
I was just looking on the Google, or, love Google Earth. There is a site distance issue, trying to see cars coming as you're coming out of that intersection. And I thought with some potentially relocation of landscaping and opening that up, we could probably solve a lot of that site distance problems, but that would come at the preliminary plat stage, not this stage.
And we could bring an exhibit in with us that demonstrates what the site distance is and what, if there is a problem, what we can do to mitigate that.
Any other questions for the applicant?
Madam Chair.
Commissioner
I
Casanelli.
just have a clarification with staff. We got rid of step up in zoning, correct? So, I mean, I think there was one concern earlier of this being a foot in the door to go potentially from R15 to R40. If we approve this request tonight, I mean, we're locked into the R15. Is that correct?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Casanelli, if you approve the land use change to medium high density residential, that's what it will be. The development agreement will lock in the concept development plan with the density proposed.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant? All right, if you have no further comments, we're ready to go.
Thank you.
Okay,
Good evening.
thank you. I get a motion to close the public testimony on H-2021-0015.
So moved.
It has been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on H-2021-0015. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Casanelli.
I remember, I can't believe that was 2017, but I do remember that. And I think the first person that gave testimony said this would be the second best option going in there. it doesn't sound like it's ever going to be perfect. And again, this is one of these infills that's difficult. I think this is probably the best. And I think if it comes, once this comes back to us again, we can address the site issues. That's the concern, is what it seems like. And what the applicant stated was that actually the traffic count would be 65% of if it's office buildings in there or something, you're going to see it at peak hours. So I do definitely want to see some changes in here. Commissioner Yearsley brought up kind of the layout there, and I hope that, and maybe we can make some recommendations in a motion depending on how this goes. But I would like to see maybe if we can shift them around, maybe a little bit of a redesign in that to allow for site changes going out onto Hickory and whatnot. But I think that can all be accomplished, maybe moving some of the buildings around or doing something. But all in all, I think this is going to be the best, really the best plan for this land, and the owner certainly has a right to do something with this and be able to sell it. So those are, and again, I think it's probably the best that they're ever going to see on this.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner Grove.
I have a question for staff real quick. Hickory is considered a collector, is that right?
That is correct.
And just kind of looking at this overall area, if this were to redevelop or was to develop now versus in the past, most of those, or that business complex would take primary access off of Hickory versus Fairview. Is that how most of that would work? I mean, if this were coming in without any of those businesses there, it seems like there's a lot of access off of Fairview that wouldn't necessarily be granted today.
Madam Chair, Commissioner Groves, typically access is taken from the lesser street classification. So a collector street versus an arterial, yes.
So the reason I'm bringing that up is this could easily have more traffic on Hickory if it were redone. And so just kind of keeping that in mind when we're looking at this project in particular is that it's not increasing it as much as this area could potentially take based on standards of how access is taken off of the arterial Fairview versus the collector street. So keeping that in mind as we kind of discuss some of this. Overall, I think, infill projects are always going to be difficult. This seems to be a good compromise as to where it goes. Never a huge fan of losing commercial, but as it is kind of tucked back there, I see commercial being a difficult ask for this property based on the size and location. So with that, I'm more or less in favor of how this is moving forward.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Yearsley.
On my first blush with this, without reviewing the site, what they were proposing, and my initial one was like, no, because I was concerned about losing the commercial in that respect. But given to look at the site, what they're proposing, it's not. It's an R15, but it's not considered high dense. Not as high density as they could have. I like the layout. And at this point, all we are doing is proving the rezone and the land use map. So we're not actually approving what's going on there yet. And we get another shot at this to make sure we do it right. I do appreciate the neighbors talking about the access on that and the site distance problems with that, which I believe there is problems that need to be addressed, but we can address that through the preliminary plat review. As for a parking issue, I don't believe this site has the parking issue. I think it's the Solterra subdivision that has the parking problems, and it's not this owner's responsibility to fix that problem. Sounds kind of harsh, but that's my opinion. I think he's got good parking with that. He's actually added extra spaces on this property for more parking if he has more guests coming over and stuff like that. So I think he's done a decent job looking at that. And I guess with Commissioner Casanelli's comment, I am concerned about the 4 units facing or backing up against the homes. It's a lot of density or bulk right behind those homes. If we could limit those to 3 or 2, I would be a lot more comfortable when you come forward with the preliminary plat. So with that, I actually would be in favor of this rezone.
I'll jump in unless you want to go, Commissioner Lorcher. Okay. Yeah, I agree. I think this is as good as what we've seen on this back here, and I think it would be a tough sell on commercial. I as well can hear the voice of our former commissioners not wanting to let commercial go for high density. But I think this particular spot is a tough one, and it is infill, and it would definitely be better than the fire hazard that probably exists there right now. And I agree. I think there could be some minor changes that would make it better as far as the traffic and the mass of the building behind the other homes. So yeah, certainly address that in the future. But I think as far as this concept plan is concerned and it's tied to this approval, I'm comfortable with this moving forward. And agree, the traffic issues are not this owner's responsibility. There's no fixing those traffic issues with anything we do on this property, especially now that it's less than half of what was proposed several years ago.
Madam Chair.
Oh.
Or Commissioner Lorcher, I was
Commissioner
going for the
Lorcher.
motion. If
I actually don't have anything else to add. I bank at D11s every day, so I'm actually swinging around these entrances and driveways on a regular basis, and it's manageable. I mean, I go out any times of day, 8, 9, 10 to, I mean, it's Eagle Road is right down the street, so it is what it is.
Yep. Mr. Yearsley.
Madam Chair, after considering all staff, applicant, and public testimony, I move to recommend approval to City Council of file number H 2021-0015 as presented in the staff report for the hearing date of July 1st, 2021, with no modifications.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to recommend approval on H-2021-0015 Woodcrest Townhomes. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. One more motion, please.
Madam Chair, I move we adjourn.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carries. Have a great holiday weekend.